Big games come and go, but some developers hang around for years, decades even, crafting a legacy. Some of them become renowned to a ludicrous degree, and we think that they can do no wrong, but alas, there are some who falter and ultimately lose their way. So let's take a look at 15 game companies who suffered this fate. BioWare, Anthem. Say what you will about Dragon Age 2, Dragon Age Inquisition, and even Mass Effect Andromeda. On some level, all of these games had something going for them, but it was not so in the case of Anthem, which released in a horrible state and probably has the worst post-launch support of any games-as-a-service title yet. It's not the terrible loot drops, boring combat, lack of customization, barren in-game, or plentiful glitches that gets us. It's that BioWare, famous for some of the best RPGs ever made, couldn't even string together a decent story to tell. Platinum Games, The Legend of Korra, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutants in Manhattan, and Star Fox Zero. Platinum Games is celebrated for titles like Nier Automata, however, it's easy to forget about its trifecta of releases with Activision, namely Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutants in Manhattan, The Legend of Korra, and Transformers Devastation. These ranged from horrible to good, though the developer didn't earn much credit for the disappointing Star Fox Zero on the Wii U. At the time, it felt like the brains behind such classics as Vanquish were floundering, but thankfully, it didn't last. Ready at Dawn, The Order 1886. You might be thinking that The Order 1886, Ready at Dawn's hyped PS4 exclusive, wasn't really all that bad. However, compared to the developer's previous efforts, it's hard not to see The Order 1886 as a huge dip in form. It had oversimplified gameplay, weird borders on the top and bottom of the screen at all times, and lasted only a handful of hours. Ready at Dawn would continue slumming it with deformers, but it did make a subsequent comeback with Oculus Rift titles Lone Echo and Echo Arena. Visceral Games, Dead Space 3. The first Dead Space offered a mix of Metroidvania, third-person shooting, and Event Horizon-style horror, and we were hooked. The second game was even bigger and better, but that was probably where the issue started. That is, Dead Space getting big for Electronic Arts. The publisher decided to tone down the horror in Dead Space 3, pump up the action, and throw in some asinine microtransactions because it's all about the money, money, money. The result was a game that failed to meet sales projections. Forget capitalizing on the success of its predecessors, despite not being all that bad. Visceral would subsequently work on Battlefield Hardline before teaming up with former writer Amy Hennig on the ill-fated Star Wars project Ragtag. Bungie, Destiny 2. The first Destiny launched in a pretty miserable state, but Bungie turned things around handsomely, culminating in the stellar Age of Triumph. With Destiny 2, it offered a clean slate where players would have to grind back up to dominance. While the base game was met with strong acclaim, fans quickly realized that nearly everything that made Destiny 1 great, from earning cosmetics and strikes and having powerful exotics to subclass customization, and even entire PvP modes, was all gone. Much of the new content was an excuse to push Eververse content, and the backlash grew so strong that Bungie committed to a months-long plan just to add in previously missing features. Konami, Metal Gear Survive. If Konami wasn't phasing out franchises like Castlevania and focusing more on the pachinko business, then it was mistreating its employees and Metal Gear Solid creator Hideo Kojima. Despite Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain clearly missing stuff, it received universal acclaim. No matter, though, because Konami would push its own successor out with Metal Gear Survive. It had zombies, survival elements, and, well, not much else. From a masterclass in storytelling to aping other genres to be relevant, Metal Gear Survive was the series and Konami's lowest point yet. EA Los Angeles, Command & Conquer 4 Tiberian Twilight. EA's gonna EA. Instead of having Westwood Studios focus on Command & Conquer, the studio's bread and butter, the team worked on the sci-fi MMORPG Earth and Beyond. It subsequently shut down, and Westwood Studios followed shortly after, with the Command & Conquer franchise being handled by EA Los Angeles, formerly DreamWorks Interactive, and now DICE Los Angeles. To be fair, the studio was experienced in RTS titles like The Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth, and it went on to make Command & Conquer 3 Tiberian Wars a stellar sequel. Command & Conquer 4 Tiberian Twilight, however, was a disappointment, making too many attempts to alter the series' core gameplay while introducing some terrible new requirements, like playing the single-player campaign to unlock units for multiplayer, and being always online. From there, the franchise stalled, veering into a mobile spin-off, though the original creators are thankfully working on a remaster of Tiberian Dawn and Red Alert. Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed Unity. 2014 wasn't a good year for Ubisoft. After the buggy and underwhelming Watch Dogs, the company needed its biggest names to succeed. Assassin's Creed Unity actually had some hope around it. The previous game, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, was very well done, and features like larger crowds, co-op, and a compelling era seemed promising. Unfortunately, Unity was horribly broken at launch, barely running at a stable frame rate when it wasn't shoving microtransactions down your throat. Even after many of the bugs were cleaned up, it was clear that the gameplay wasn't a fresh take on the series, nor was the story all that interesting. Assassin's Creed Syndicate arrived a year later and was a significant improvement, but it did little to really help the series out of its design and storytelling rut. Valve. Artifact. Artifact was booed from the moment that Valve announced it at the International 2017. The overall concept of Dota-esque lanes meeting CCG mechanics with Magic the Gathering creator Richard Garfield at the helm sounded interesting. Unfortunately, Valve made Artifact a paid release. That too with cards that had to be purchased separately on top of other poor decisions. Valve would commit to making Artifact better, and then went silent on any news for the game. Coming from a studio that's created such amazing experiences as Half-Life and Portal, Artifact stands out as a baffling anomaly. Square Enix Final Fantasy XIII. It's hard not to look back and question Final Fantasy XIII. We're not talking in terms of the development, which started in 2004 for the PlayStation 2 before heading to the PS3 in 2005, or how the game was originally part of the Fabula Nova Crystallis, of which Final Fantasy Versus 13 was a part of, before becoming Final Fantasy 15, or even how it went multi-platform. Instead, why was the game so insultingly linear? Why was the story so nonsensical and filled with characters that committed inane actions? The financial success of Final Fantasy XIII would result in 2 more sequels, each with diminished success, but at that point it was clear that the once beloved RPG series had hit a low point. Bethesda Fallout 76. Developed as a crude multiplayer version of Fallout 4, Fallout 76 is Bethesda's attempt at a games-as-a-service online title. Fallout 4, for all its blemishes, at least had some decent gunplay, interactions, and quests. Fallout 76 doesn't even have that. NPCs were mostly gone, save for the robots. Stories were told through holotapes, which makes Destiny storytelling look Shakespearean in comparison, and combat was a horrid mess. And there's still a large number of bugs present, but more than anything, you just have to wonder how Bethesda took something as interesting as online Fallout and turned it into a dreary, drab, and mostly boring game like Fallout 76. Capcom Resident Evil 6. When a series that's based on moody atmospherics and survival horror is given cover mechanics, a globe-trotting scale, and a heavier action-based approach, you know there's gonna be problems. Capcom's series wasn't exactly riding high by the time of Resident Evil 6's release, but it took that beloved gameplay to new depths. Pacing was erratic, the writing was awful, and the overall action felt tedious. Where was the horror we knew and loved? What in the world was this overly convoluted narrative surrounding the C-Virus? Why were the characters so stupid? Thankfully, Capcom went back to its roots with Resident Evil 7 and the subsequent Resident Evil 2 remake. Blizzard Diablo 3 The First Year. Diablo 3 was constantly under the gun to be a successor to Diablo 2 rather than its own great game. That being said, Blizzard made a number of other terrible decisions like real money trading through the auction house and having the game be always online. When Diablo 3 launched, servers immediately crashed, preventing players from accessing the story mode. When they did, they were horrified at the pitiful loot system, annoying difficulty, boring gameplay, and a plethora of bugs. Blizzard Entertainment took all this feedback, however, and improved the game massively, culminating in the arrival of Loot 2.0 and the Reaper of Souls expansion, and it never ever had any controversies after that, right? Origin, Ultima 9. Have you ever heard the tragedy of Ultima the Ninth? It's not a story that EA would tell you. Ultima 9, Ascension, would have capped the story that began in Ultima 7, returning to a more classic Britannia and style of role-playing. So what happened? Story changes, rewrites, design changes, the success of Ultima Online resulting in diverted resources, key team members leaving, the list goes on. Ultima 9 was rife with bugs, and flagrantly disregarded the story of previous games. At best, it was a terrible finale, and at worst, unfinished and devoid of fun. IO Interactive, Hitman Absolution. Hitman Absolution on its own isn't a bad game. However, previous games focused on sandbox environments with improvisation and properly planned assassinations. IO Interactive opted for a linear structure and story, having players complete rote objectives to progress. Was it a terrible stealth game that completely disregarded the ability to don disguises or improvise when killing some targets? Well, no, but by ignoring the sandbox elements of its predecessors, while also buckling under a number of technical issues, Hitman Absolution wasn't the epic comeback that fans expected for the series. And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily. Also, don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon, that way you don't miss out on any of our videos.